Hey everyone, I'm Rod the Aussie IT Contractor, and this time I'm continuing my discussion on permanent versus contractor employment with some more advanced topics. If you're just starting your contractor journey and looking for some more basic information, please check out my original perm versus contracting video, and I'll put a link in the comments below. So back in the days when people would just casually meet up in person, the crazy people that they are, in things like pubs and cafes, I would find myself having a chat with new or potential contractors over a coffee or a beer, and they would want to know what are the gritty truths about contracting. And after I had recanted a few of my more interesting war stories, they would always ask the big question: would I go contracting again? And it is the classic question: if I knew 22 years ago what I knew now, would I still have taken on my first contract? And the short answer is yes. Even with 2020 hindsight, it was the right decision for me. So let's just jump into a little bit of permanent versus contracting SWOT analysis. What's contracting's biggest strength? Well, the money. Seriously, the money is far better than what I could have made as a permanent employee. Yes, a contractor sells all of their ancillary benefits of a permanent employment for cold hard cash and trades away job security, even if there is such a thing these days. But even with all of that considered, the money is massively better as a contractor. The opportunity for contractors is the great variety of work. As a permie, and I was one for over a decade, I just did whatever work was given to me, and there was no negotiation on that. Even if it was the same work for 3 years, then that's what I did. The opportunity to move around, even in a big company, never came my way. As a contractor, even in the early years, I was finding opportunities to work on tasks and projects that I would never have seen if I'd stayed as a permie. As a contract comes to an end, I could and still do look for roles at companies that I wanted to work with and on projects that I think would be interesting. In my life as a contractor, I've worked for 10 big corporates, and many of them multiple times, in banking, across retail consumer banking, regulatory compliance and reporting, business and corporate affairs, foreign currency markets, superannuation, life insurance and general insurance, business process redesign, product launch and big tech implementations. I doubt I could have gotten anywhere near that experience and exposure as a permie. A weakness for contracting can be the lack of career growth, and as one of the big attractions to permanent employees is career growth, that is something to consider. But for me, I was never going to get onto a high trajectory career path. Any promotions that I saw came a long way apart, and the few that did happen didn't really result in much of a pay rise. In the final role that I had as a permanent employment before I went to contracting, I worked in a team of 10 people, and we had a manager who'd been there for over 3 years. So mathematically, the chances of me reaching even that small next step was under 5%. And look around at your organisation. How many 35-year-old general managers are there? Very few, I would expect. And how many 55-year-old team leaders are there? Perhaps a lot more. Career progression, even in big organisations where there should be a lot of opportunity, seem very hard to come by. Do you really want to spend years waiting in line for a single step up to get maybe a 15 to 20% pay rise? Well, I didn't. I could leave my permie role, go contracting, and earn more than my manager in my first year out. As for a threat for contractors, well, there's a vision in the corporate world that effort is rewarded and loyalty is rewarded, and for contractors, they're not rewarded for their additional efforts and they're not rewarded for their loyalty to the company. So is that a threat? Well, for many years I bought the line that the company rewards effort and loyalty, and the reality is the company itself doesn't even see their employees' effort or loyalty. At best, your immediate manager is aware of your performance and your late nights and the extra effort and that you take on higher duties, but the company itself is too big, it doesn't know. So then it's up to your manager to offer the rewards. But what if they don't have a budget, or can only offer a pay rise to a set proportion of their team, or have a bell curve that they've got to meet? And that happens in big corporates all the time. Over a 6-year period with 4 different managers evaluating me during my permanent roles, my annual review KPI score was between 3.92 and 3.98. And guess what the score was that was required for a pay rise and a bonus? Yep, 4.0. So somehow for 6 years straight, I was a great employee, but just not quite good enough to get a pay rise. Many companies promote the concept of loyalty because it serves them very well, but I never saw the benefit for being loyal to my company when I was a permie. So is it really a threat? Okay, now on to smooth versus lumpy income. And a quick recap on daily rates. As simple as it sounds, you get paid as a contractor for the number of days that you work, which for me is around 230 days a year. Your daily rate times the number of days worked equals your annual income. What I consider is a somewhat hidden perk for a permanent employee is that their annual salary is nicely smoothed out over the year as their employer averages their salary over each pay period and doesn't pay them based on the number of days they work. So regardless of how many days they work in a pay period, their pay is the same. Let's look at an example. So for ease of calculations, let's say that Sally is a permanent employee and she's on $130,000 per annum, and Mark is a contractor and he's on $565.22 a day at 230 days per year. Quick calculations. Oh good, he's also on 130 grand a year. Well, that's convenient. So Sally and Mark both work the same 230 days of the year, taking off the same time for public holidays and annual leave and sick leave, and they're both paid every 2 weeks. Sally is paid $5,000 per pay over 2 weeks, and Mark is paid anywhere from $0 to $5,652 per 2 week payday. The contractor needs an average income mindset and not a how much cash has hit my account mindset. Get used to living on the maximum pay and not saving for lower or no pay periods is the guaranteed way to go broke. Budgeting is not a natural skill. It takes effort and discipline to develop the mindset that cash in your account is there to cover times when your income drops due to public holidays and leave. At some point in your contracting career, you may find that you have a contract role without an agency to go through. And for me, this occurred twice. Once when a hiring manager in my network from a previous company that I had worked at mentioned that they had a role available. I interviewed at that company and got it, but found myself as a contractor without an agency. Another was at the end of a contract and I found a new role in that same company myself, but that role wasn't with the agency that I was already with. So in both circumstances, I had a role but no agency. So how do I manage that? One option is to do a direct contract with the client. Now this can be possible. The upside is there's no agency, and that means there's no agency fees. So you and the client might get a slightly better deal. But there are quite a few downsides. Firstly, you still need a contract, so hopefully the client has one that they've used previously, as drawing up a new direct employment contract from scratch won't be easy and you'll likely have to find a lawyer to do it, which is both time consuming and expensive. Direct hiring a contractor may also be unusual for that client, so it could be tricky for the hiring manager to navigate through the process if there is one and find an appropriate person within the management structure to agree to it. Another issue is how do you get paid? You'll need to invoice the client directly, and then they have to work out how to get your invoice into their payroll processing system, or they set you up as a supplier and you invoice the client's accounts payable department. But with no agency to handle the invoicing, you're on your own and you're chasing up accounts payable every month. In my opinion, a much better alternative is to find a friendly agency which already does business with your client for them to provide payroll services for you. However, be warned, this is not an easy process to set up. There are still 2 contracts to set up, one between you and the agency for payroll services and one from the agency to the client for billing purposes. For the contractor, the upside is that you can use the agency's timesheeting and invoice process and you get paid regularly and promptly. The downside for the agency is that they still need to make some money on the deal, so they will try and charge the client some sort of margin. However, as the agency did not recruit you for that role, they can't get the usual recruitment fees. Whatever deal they make with you or the client is likely to barely cover their costs, and so there's no margin in it for them, and so the agent that's putting this together isn't going to be able to count you as a sale that goes towards their targets or the bonuses. I managed to arrange payroll services through an agency that I knew really well. I had a great relationship with an agent and they pushed through a payroll agreement as a big favour for me. I'd like to think that I've repaid that agent and their agency through staying in touch over the years and giving them some really great referrals for other work and taking on work that they've recommended for me. Being a contractor can be isolating if you're not careful. Moving between roles and companies on a regular basis can make it very difficult to keep in touch with work friends, and I've found it invaluable to build up and keep a network of fellow contractors, people who understand the issues and the pressures of this type of work. It's great to be able to ask someone, "Hey, this just happened to me in a contract. Is that unusual?" If you're a seasoned contractor and have lost touch with some great people, maybe now's the time to reach out to them on LinkedIn and say hi. It's never too late to strengthen your contractor network. I hope these advanced topics have been useful. If there are any topics that you would like me to cover in future videos, please leave a suggestion below. You never know, it might make it into my next video. And as always, thanks very much for watching.